Hello, we're here today on a podcast for Starseed Counseling, which has these anchors of mindfulness and compassion for navigating the mud of life, as well as blooming into aspects beyond self, which we call transpersonal, the non ordinary states of reality where we exist beyond our traditional concept of the self. Today, I'd like to expand a little bit more on two transpersonal models that are really excellent and well equipped for working with your ancestors. And as we know, when we look at things like complex trauma or complex PTSD, it doesn't happen in isolation. Patterns can be passed down behaviorally through generations. If we look at something like fear, or avoidance or even cultural narratives of another group, that's something bigotry that's absolutely passed down culturally and collectively. And Carl Jung thought that that was his definition of the shadow. Any parts of society that we reject, that would be a collective shadow. Any parts of our personal narrative, parts where we experience shame, doubt, disbelief, aspects that we might consider gross or bad, those are all considered rejected parts, which would then make them our own shadow. So, by looking at our shadow work or the aspects of self that are difficult to navigate, we begin a healing journey and process. And in my perspective, it's really important to have a developmental context and lens. So, if we look at something like the chakra system from India, we see that the root is really important. And that color red, that texture of belonging, safety, really necessitates the next developmental phase, which is creativity, sexual expression, and that necessitates the third position, which is then the seat of confidence and the ability to express one's will and beautiful gifts in the world in healthy, balanced ways. And then that leads us up to the heart. And so it's really important that as we're talking about developmental psychology, as we're talking about transpersonal experiences, that were age appropriate, were developmentally appropriate. It's one thing to look up and be like, oh my gosh, the universe, God, all that is, the stars, the solar systems. But unless we have really dealt with matters of the heart, that could be a bypassing or a jumping forward that's not helpful. So it's important, plainly speaking, to look below your belly button. How is your sense of security? How is your spiritual savings account? How is your savings account in the natural world? All of these things are important. So it's, yes, about our financial health, being able to have a roof over our head and a sense of security is equally important as a lot of the transpersonal frames we're going to talk about today that might seem whimsical or airy or really kind of head chakra or throat chakra, Manipura, or even our vision centers. So I just want to name that the heart really becomes the center point where we're not jumping out into all that is, and we're not simply caught up in the mundane or the material world. We're just present right here when we sit in the seat of the heart, because it really is that center point of all of these different dimensions and planes of consciousness. So when we look at consciousness research, we can see that consciousness isn't just a thought. I got my pup here, so we got multiple consciousnesses in the room. So consciousness is not just a thought. It is also how we feel when we have a thought. It's the visual imagery we get when we think about our mother, or even the smells we get when we think about our grandparents, or where we grew up, or how we grew up. And so as we traverse a healing journey, starting with the foundation of gratitude, starting with the foundation of present moment awareness, mindfulness, slowing down, then we have the tools we need to start to unravel a lot of our emotional patterns that we might experience. So, some really helpful tools in that unravel are going to be noticing what emotions arrive and listening for that knock. Is anger coming at your door? Let anger in. Is a hurricane of grief so big that tears are falling out of every orifice? Come in. And so, just like we'd have a guest come to our home and you might offer them a cup of tea, or a neighbor comes by and you haven't seen them, how are you? It's the same with our emotions. Emotions are not meant to be a permanent state. That would make it a mood. And so that's where we get into a mood disorder. If it's constantly rainy for 4 seasons, there's something problematic with your weather system inside that we might need to bring into balance. But if it's a rainy week, that's okay. That's totally okay. So we have to allow things to really ebb and flow in our life. And that is the practice of the knock and allowing emotions to come in and out. We can get really versed at that. Another really important way we can work with our nervous systems, with our emotional health, is going to be hitting this point where we've done what we feel like is the majority of our personal work. You're good at letting emotions come in and out. You know how to slow yourself down. And then what can start to happen is ancestral work can flow through you. And so, what was once perceived as an individual trauma that you've worked through potentially becomes part of a collective sphere of experiences, and your own ancestors begin to unwind through you and within you. And so, models that are really helpful for working with family systems is going to be called something family constellation, developed by Bert Hellinger post World War One, two. These modalities have been used to bring communities together to process things like war, rape, genocide, colonization, the unspeakables. It gives us a system through Gestalt or present moment awareness where we can gather in a circle in a group setting and heal. When I say heal, on one level, I'm aware that there's nothing to heal because you're just right how you are on a certain level. And on another level, there are many of us who are hurting, who have wounds of separation from family of origin due to forced diaspora or immigration. Many of us carry wounds that are racial. Race is a construct, yet it has all of this society and institution behind it that creates glass ceilings and limitations. If we are to pull public health records right now, if we are to pull economic records, we see that individuals in the same position often make more money if they're a male and if they come from a Caucasian background. And that is still happening despite equity, despite someone having the same exact degree. What is your name on that piece of paper? And that determines how much more money you make or don't make. And that's real. So we have to acknowledge that there are things in the mud that we contend with. So I want to take a little time and talk more about family constellation. So the key tenets to family constellation is that we move through life with hidden loyalties, unconscious behavioral patterns that protect our ego and keep a family system in place, even if it's dysfunctional. So Bear is a model that I've developed that builds on the orders of love that were originally Bert Hellinger's. They're originally his. However, there was one thing that was completely missing to me, and that one thing was right relationship. Was right relationship not just human to human, but within our ecology. And so when I lead, I teach, I offer family constellation, we position the elements as the container for our circle, as well as ask them to be the force which help compost all emotions, the untouchable, the unspeakable of a genocide. No human alone can process that. It's too much to bear for someone's nervous system, your neurology, your thalamus, your amygdala would just burst. It's too much. And so we need a group, we need a family to stand in as we do this level of processing. So, right relationship for me within a family constellation is first asking for permission. Do I have permission to do a constellation today? Is it the right time astrologically? Where is the sun and the moon? Is it right relationship to even begin the work? And in an industrial society, or maybe post industrial, we just go, we do, we overconsume caffeine, and we don't think twice of, do I have permission to engage in this today? We don't just expect the answers yes. And sometimes the answer is no. And that's really important to notice. And it's important to feature water, earth, fire, air, wood, metal as our allies in the space. So this is what I'm adding as the R, right relationship as it pertains to ecological attunement, ecological justice, and really we need help from nature spirits. So the model I have is bear. And it takes that level of ferocity to do this kind of emotional heavyweight lifting. B is going to stand for belonging. No matter what you've done or someone in your system's done, they still are part of your family. Even if you don't like them, even if they killed your father, even if they raped your sister, in this model, they still belong, and we give everyone that basic dignity. You can still belong in the circle, even if I need distance, even if I don't talk to you. But you belonging allows love and flow into the entire group. E stands for elders. So we have to go to the elders who've carried the lineage. We go to the ones who are on canes, walkers, whose bodies need to be in a certain place. We don't say, come to us. That's inappropriate. We go to them. We're in service to them. We thank them for being the roots of our lineages, of our cultures, of our family stories. And we celebrate them by going to them. And that also, E also gets into hierarchy. So elders, hierarchy. If you're the big brother, you got to act like it. If you're the little sister, you got to act like it. So Adler in the 1930s talked a lot about birth order and how valuable it was. But what he didn't get into is how dysfunctional it can be when one sibling tries to be the parent. We call that parentification, and control the other ones. So how we start to notice what these imbalances are with belonging or exclusion, with lack of hierarchy or parentification is through Virginia Satir's model of family sculpting. We put our bodies, we put our bones, our blood, our air, our tissues, all of ourselves and say, okay, where do I need to go? And the body intuitively knows, just like dancing, just like breathing, just like a blue jay singing a song. You don't need to learn it, you know it because you feel it, you smell it, you see it. We could call that intuition or we could just call it common sense. Your choice. So that's BE. And then A, this one's the hardest. The most difficult is going to be acceptance. Can you accept what you see? If you see genocide in a constellation, can you accept a hidden truth that has been like a splinter in your side or your heart for years, for decades, for eons, for centuries? Can you stare straight at the face and look at the injustice of slavery and that history that is a living history, a living archive in our current bodies? So it takes a level of ferocity like Bear just to even sit in acceptance for what is. I was reflecting today on a past constellation where I had an individual who wanted to do one for the Holocaust, and her ancestors were German. And she didn't know how much they were involved in the war, but knew they were higher ranking. And when we cast her constellation and she saw for the first time what she'd been carrying in her lineage from her parents and her grandparents, she screamed a primordial scream that I will never get out of my ears. And that scream didn't just last a minute, it lasted minutes. And I can remember feeling like a hurricane was blowing over me, just witnessing her witness. It was profound. And so when we look at acceptance, it's not that we're trying to fix the story or make it better or hide it or make it more palatable, but rather we just allow what is to emerge. And it can be painful and it can be potent if held with respect, if held with resourcing, if held in a healthy container and community. A. R, right relationship can of course be giving and taking, reciprocity in a traditional sense. If I want a sip of your coffee, I wouldn't just go up and take it. I might ask first, can I have a cup of coffee? You'd probably say sure. But we're in a culture that takes, and we think we own things. And when I say we, I mean the American psyche, European psyche that I live in. Even though my ancestors lived elsewhere, I'm still in this soup. And so I have to slow myself down and ask the blade of grass, is it okay if I pick you? I don't just go picking flowers. I ask and I leave something, leaving the world better because it is our future blood and bone that comes out of our body, called a child, that will be the one to inherit the earth you leave. And what are you leaving behind? Are you even thinking of them, of us? Maybe, maybe not. So this model challenges and has a little friction with Bert Hellinger's original positioning. And I also articulate that we need to be decolonial in the model itself. Because if we look at the historical context, Bert Hellinger was a German who left. And if we look at his context, he originally was a Catholic missionary and he was listening and taking in cultural practices. And that really informed this model. So when I look at indigenous cultures around the world, I see many of these ancestral rituals or practices are commonplace. So I feel like it's very important to underscore family constellation is not new, but what is the reclamation, the reclaiming of what it means to be decolonial, what it means to exist in our rituals before this colonial mindset, the imperial mindset of take, do more, enslave at all costs for productivity. Before that point, how can we work with our ancestors? So, welcome to Bear. I hope that mnemonic helps you. I know as both a learner, a teacher, and a student, mnemonics help me. So I hope Bear is something that you can take along. Please know it's been inspired by Bert Hellinger, but it is not part of his original model. And if you want to read more on it, know I'm more than happy to share some of those resources and articles with you from our research team.